Therapists, what was your biggest, I know I'm not supposed to judge you but holy sh*t moment?
Once had a patient whose wife shook their baby to death. He wanted help reconnecting with his wife. At the time I was a young father of a newborn myself, and he triggered a lot of fear in me for my own child, a deep loathing of his spouse, and pity, the how pathetic kind, for the patient. I tried for 3 sessions, met his spouse and everything before handing the case over to my supervisor, who knew about my initial reactions, and tried to help me through it. Unfortunately, it ended up being more about my feelings than his, and I was new to the profession at the time. These things are expected to crop up from time to time, but I was still taken aback by my own reactions.
I do acute pediatric inpatient behavioral therapy. Has never happened with a child, and never will. Parents on the other hand can be real pieces of poo, and the way they treat, abuse their children then throw them off on us and scream, fix them. I'm a big burly guy and I've cried many nights over this.
I was once in my psychiatrist's office, a bi-monthly, 15 minutes med check. She asked me what was going on, more as conversation. I told her that in the last 6 weeks, my 3 elders, aunt and 2 uncles, I was guardian, conservator for had died, one right after the other. My wife had a heart attack. My daughter attempted suicide. And my mom broke her hip and had laid on her floor for a week before being found. She drank and ate from the dog's bowls. I got that call within 10 minutes of setting up the last funeral. She stopped the meeting, got on the phone with a therapist in the office next to her and had her postpone her next meeting to speak with me. I was so fed up, I had no idea. I think she saved my life.
I feel like a lot of the comments saying that they never judge their clients might be working in voluntary services or they've been very fortunate in their client base. Judgment isn't an inherently bad thing. It's how we know that murdering people is wrong. So when a convicted pedophile client told me, "Nothing gets me going like a pair of little girls' worn panties," you better believe I judged the F out of him. I continued to work with him and I treated him with compassion and respect because he's a human being worthy of both. I did my job because I'm a professional. But I can't honestly say that I didn't judge him. I judged that he should never be around children. I judged that he is not yet ready for change. I judged that his access to his own daughter should be closely supervised. That's a lot of judgments. Understanding your own inherent biases and how they influence your work is a very important part of training and practice.
Lots of people discussing pedophilia as an example of the toughest stuff to not judge despite our training. I haven't yet treated a pedophile, thankfully. At least not an identified one. I did run a men's anger management group though, and some of those men had done some terrible things to women. Most of them I found ways to like and admire for their positive aspects, but there were 2 guys in that group I just could never find unconditional positive regard for. One guy basically never spoke in group. He would give one-word answers and occasionally just discuss how unfair that system was to him. I worked really hard to open him up and find things to connect over, but he never opened up to me or the group. He left the group after he strangled his girlfriend and went to jail. She survived, thankfully. The other left group early routinely, showed up late, participated minimally and similarly never wanted to open up honestly. He left early one group after we had discussed him staying to the end and threatened me when I told him he wasn't going to get credit for attendance, something the court required. Oddly, I eventually moved into the apartment below him, completely without knowledge, and listened to him scream at his girlfriend and break poo while I called the cops. I judge these men. They're pooty. Maybe they're redeemable, but redemption requires self-exploration and they both refuse to do so. It's worth noting how differently I felt about them than so many others in the group. Men I found ways to help and admire and respect even in spite of their awful behavior in the past.
Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week she canceled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an orgy, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone.
I work with youth and adolescents who have anxiety, trauma, and/or depression. Some of the kids I worked with had some pretty severe attachment issues. Regardless of this, I never thought I'd have to seriously explain. 1. You can't just buy a straitjacket for your kid. 2. Feeding your kid ultra-spicy ramen each night instead of the meal everyone else is eating isn't specifically defined as abuse, but you have to understand the emotional abuse that this causes. 3. Your kid isn't trying to kill you because they stand in your doorway at night crying. That's likely because they're scared of their traumatic nightmares, but feel like you will just yell at them if they wake you up. Edit. Removed a phrase. Edit 2. Thank you all for your questions and support. This case has really helped to shape my approach to therapy, and has highlighted the importance of healthy communication between parents and kids. My number 1 tip: don't let someone else tell you how you feel, think. If someone says, "You're angry with me," or something to that effect, ask yourself if you really are. If you're not actually angry, then don't spend a second more on it. A lot of kids, family members get hung up on trying to justify their own actions according to someone else's perception. Edit 3. Fixed straitjacket spelling. No, it's not a jacket for sexual orientations.
Clinical psychologist working primarily in forensics here. This means my clients are usually involved in legal proceedings, family court, juvenile court, criminal court, etc. My job is usually to evaluate or provide treatment. I'm not there to judge, that's the judge's job, but of course I have my thoughts. I am usually impressed by the justifications people make for putty behavior. The one that irks me the most is when parents manipulate their child against the other parent. I've had to do therapy for a 5-year-old who said she doesn't want to see a parent because they haven't paid child support. Excuse me? What 5-year-old knows, understand, or needs to be worried about child support?
Opposite side, if that's accepted too. I was assigned to see the lead psychologist of the local hospital as I was severely depressed and had become suicidal. She literally rolled her eyes at me, told me to grow up, and said she could be having appointments with people who were actually about to kill themselves, not me who was already working with the team. This sent me absolutely spinning, bottling everything up, thinking I didn't deserve help, and ended up in hospital 2 years later after an attempt. When they looked at my records, the hospital suddenly became very interested in any psychological experts I'd previously spoken to, informed them of the above incident. They asked if I knew the name and I said I didn't, but they had a strong accent. They immediately looked like they were about to burst out crying, apologized excessively, then informed me they had been fired a year ago. No idea how many people were affected by that therapist.
You mentioned you're getting ready to start therapy. I know we're different, but therapy was one of the best decisions I ever made for myself. It's good to have a neutral third-party weigh in on what troubles you. And remember, you don't have to stay with a therapist if you don't want. Therapy, like any psychological treatment, is often more about trial and error to find what works for the individual than anything. Also, you'll get out of it what you put in, so be upfront, frank and honest with your therapist. That will help them work with you on determining the best therapy course for you. I wish you the best of luck.
When I was underage, I got caught with a drink on Bourbon Street and got a minor in possession. I was telling my therapist about it, and said that the police caught me with a hand grenade in New Orleans. He didn't realize that a hand grenade was a type of drink, and it was funny to watch him try to process that his patient might have just casually told him that he had been caught with a fragmentation grenade. He took a big long pause, and said, "Where did you even find a grenade?" I realized the misunderstanding quickly and corrected him. But for a moment he definitely was thinking, "Holy poo, how do I deal with this?"
Well, I quit my last therapist because I made him cry uncontrollably. He tried not to, but he just couldn't hold it back. I felt guilty and won't see him anymore. I think he may have lost a child before. I described watching my aunt grieve over her son's body. I felt so much pain losing him, but was explaining how watching my aunt was dramatically worse. The details about her is what made him lose it. I could tell he was reliving something inside his own head.
ITT. Too many goddamn responsible professionals. I came here to read the salacious stories of how some docs went ham on patients and lost their certifications. Instead, all I've gained is even more respect than I already had for the back-breaking and sometimes thankless hard work these individuals do every day. Work I could never do, not with any consistency anyway. Responsible jerks.
I work in mental health and have worked in acute and crisis settings for the majority of my career. The most notable event I experienced was when a young person had presented with significant ongoing suicidal ideation who was dealing with a lot of poo. I spent a lot of time with them, mostly de-escalation and working out what the plan should be moving forward. One of their parents came in a little while later and I had the opportunity to speak to them about where their child was and what had been going on, with their consent of course. Midway through me trying to explain some of the psychological constructs and ways the parent could help, they said to me, "Is this going to take much longer? I have a show to go and watch." All I can say is, I never judge my patients. I have never walked their path or viewed the world through their eyes. But the people around them who perpetuate the suffering of the people I work with through ignorance, malice and selfishness, I judge them. Edit and a shameless one. I've tried to reply to as much as I could. I've enjoyed some of what I would assume is trolling and talking about some other people's experiences, as it's given me a chance to reflect on some of my own stuff. But I must go to bed. I'd like to ask one thing of anyone who reads this. Remember that you can help, even just by asking how someone is or wishing them well. People who you think may be struggling and even people who aren't. This year has been hard on us all, and I appreciate all of you who have said that those in care services have difficult jobs, but we have all struggled this year. Please be as kind as you can to each other, and I hope we can all look forward to a good December and even better New Year. Edit 2. My use of the word judge needs some clarification. I do judge in some ways. It's hard not to with what I see, who I work with and the situations they experience or have experienced. What I mean by not judging is that I do not allow my judgments to distort what I am seeing or how I am working, which will normally be to the benefit of the patient and those around him, trying to help them achieve their goals and meet their needs. Final edit. I didn't think this post would get as big as it has. And I cannot respond to every comment individually by any means. I'm sure the post will be getting less attention moving forward, but I just wanted to clarify some things. This parent, who many people have made multiple assumptions about, was not trying to redirect, deflect or remove themselves from the situation by stating they had a show to watch. The show being something else people have assumed was a TV show. Remember, I've made the comment above in the context of a situation that lasted around 5 to 6 hours for me, but took you a few minutes to read. With everything that's going on right now, I wanted to make this post to let people know, those working in mental health have heard a lot. We don't judge you for how or what you're feeling, and we want to work with you to help you. I simply wanted to help in some way with a comment on the internet that I wrote in one go about an experience I have had. I know that the response to this has been overwhelmingly positive, but I would also like to say I did not mean to cause any offense or upset to anyone or claim that I am some sort of unachievable goal of non-judgment. Anyway, I'm going to try and forget about this now.
Therapist here. To piggyback on what others have said, it is highly unlikely for me to have moments where I judge my clients. It happens sometimes, but I'm able to shut down those thoughts quickly in my head and return to being present for the people I see. People are so incredibly complex that my judgment wouldn't have any meaning anyway, and it doesn't have a place in our work together. I will admit though, something that does get me feeling a little salty is when I have a client's parent that attempts to sabotage the therapeutic relationship I have with their child, or pulling them out of therapy entirely when some of the things we talk about challenges some potentially unhealthy family dynamics. I don't feel anger toward the parents, mostly I feel bad for the kid. Edit. Wow. All I have to say is that I am incredibly humbled by all of you that have shared your stories. Even though these moments are so steeped in pain, what hits me is the incredible amount of strength present in spite of the upbringing and parents many of you have had.
Patient side here. I had been seeing a therapist for a few months to help with chronic depression and self-harm with some pretty intense suicidal ideation. I had tried Suprax in the past, didn't like the side effects and put it down, but I was ready to try something new to supplement therapy. Everyone within earshot was calling Wellbutrin a miracle and lifesaver, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Since my therapist couldn't prescribe DG, I got an appointment with a psychiatrist. My first appointment, I explain what I've got going on, what I'm doing to work on it, and what I'm looking for in seeing him. I do a pretty good job holding myself together in public. I dress myself, I hold down jobs. At that point I lived on my own, now living with my partner. All in all, I've got a well-polished mask. I guess it's too good, because pretty early in our session he looked at me and said, "I don't think you're depressed." Bro, this is the first time we met. I've been here for 20 minutes, and you're ready to reverse my diagnosis? Cool, bro.
During my training I was asked how would you feel if a client were to come to you and admitted they were a pedophile that was on the edge of committing seriously horrific acts? Could you see that person as another human being that needed help, or were your personal feelings about the abhorrent behavior too strong? This factor leads some people to not continue my course on to the next level, but it really illustrates the level of non-judgment needed in this field. We all have our own personal feelings, of course, but these get talked about in supervision. Edit. Wow, thanks for the awards. I'm glad it's raised an interesting topic for discussion. I'm enjoying reading them all, even if I don't have the time to reply. Personally, in this instance I remember the Gandhi quote, hate the sin, not the sinner. Also spelling.
I work in healthcare and I've never heard a therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist judge patients openly. Other nurses and doctors, on the other hand, holy poo. At some of the clinics I've been in, the conversations in the break room and at the nurses' station blew my mind.
I'm a dude. I was brutally RPD multiple times between the ages of 7 and 10. My one and only attempt at trying to get help from a therapist was one of the most awful experiences of my life. I attempted to get help in my early 20s. Upon first going in, I was asked what had happened to me, after explaining a basic outline of the abuse. I could already see that she was very dismissive and seemed not to really believe me. She then asked about my relationship status. At the time I was in a long-term relationship with a woman who had 2 kids, boys. Upon finding this out, she immediately demanded the names and address of my girlfriend, names of the kids, and said she would be immediately getting in touch with social services to ensure that I wasn't abusing them. I can't put into words just how much that destroyed me mentally, that she could obviously see something in me that I couldn't see. That somehow she was certain that I would be an abuser. I started to cry. She told me to pull myself together. I also can't put into words the pathological visceral hatred I have for pedophiles and rapists. If I could get away with murdering them, I would. I would never ever inflict the absolute nightmare I went through on any child. I got up and left. I came very close to the edge of suicide that day. I also immediately ended the relationship because I couldn't deal with the thought that the kids might be at risk because of me. It's now 21 years later and I'm tearing up typing this. Because of that experience, I have never sought therapist help again. I survive mentally, but it's not good survival. Edit. Wow. Just wow. I am absolutely blown away by the internet strangers who are sending love and care to me. I am currently alone, in the dark, in tears, reading all these replies. To answer a few questions. I'm in the UK. I heard she was fired a few years later after a patient of hers committed suicide and mentioned her therapy in the note he left. I am in a position where currently I'm in such a fragile, very heavily medicated, mental state that if I saw another therapist and got the same reaction, that I know my mind would break and I'd take my own life. Every day is a struggle to find reasons to stay alive. I'm sure I have PTSD as I feel the need to be armed with a knife constantly. Despite being a big dude, 6 feet 4 inches, 110 kilograms, I sleep with a knife under my pillow. I often wake up screaming. I tend to be standoffish with everyone, deliberately keeping people at a distance. I know I'm a broken person. I've even avoided relationships with women with kids because I don't want my broken mental state to somehow affect those kids in any way. I have attempted suicide twice and both times I survived. I just want there to be a pill or operation where I could completely wipe out the past, even wipe me out, wake up and just have a new me, minus the depression, anxiety, fear, PTSD, crushing hatred of myself. It would be nice to wake up one day and actually be able to see some value in myself. I'd love to be married and be a dad, but currently I'm in a state where I can't ever see or allow that to happen. I'm too scared that my mental state would F up my wife and kids' lives. I can't allow that.
Not a therapist but a patient. Me and my fiancé, at the time, went in to see if we could figure out how to make things work after he hit me. After our history came out and I divulged his infidelity etc., the therapist basically said no. There's no hope. You need to get help for yourself so you can get the courage to leave and end this. I was angry at the time, but both therapists knew there was no point as he was as screwed up as it gets.
I just want to show up when some low-effort text-to-speech channel covers this.
Can I answer from the other side? I had something close to a mental breakdown after a painful breakup. Started seeing a therapist. It was going more or less well. At one point I had a sort of revelation about all my bullpoo and about my own responsibility in the whole mess. So next session I'm actually thrilled to share this with the therapist, about how I finally see a bunch of my own problems in the way I interact with women, and which caused a relationship that wasn't really healthy from the get-go. I'm halfway through trying to explain this and the therapist goes, "Oh, you know, women are weird." So that was that. I never went back, F that guy.
I'm a licensed psychologist and I'll tell you I've never judged my patients. The world is so full of judgment and it's my job to objectively look at someone who's suffering and offer them empathy and a path towards healing. The one thing I've judged is the situations that people survive and continue to live their lives. I've worked with torture survivors, survivors of genocide and famine. I've worked with people whose entire villages were wiped out because a warlord wanted the water well that was sitting in the town. It always gives me pause in terms of the anguish some people face and their resilience. So if I have one message, it would be in the words of R.J. Palacio, be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.